You're listening to the Zetetic newscast on the Zetetic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
All right, welcome to episode 10 of the Zetetic newscast. We're your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. It is July 2nd, 2020. And again, this is our 10th episode. We're also joined by a special guest for another in-person, in-studio appearance, Orthogonal Reptilian. Thanks for joining. Phasing in. Not a whole lot of housekeeping updates. I want to mention a couple developments on the site you can check out before we jump into the topics of today. And this is going to be a little bit less formal. I didn't do as much prep for this. It's been real busy in the other circles of life, and I think that'll be even more fun. We've got some links and stuff we want to talk about that have been top of mind since our last episode, and we're just going to hang out a bit and get into it.
Awesome.
Did want to mention that ZNN we were streaming and I'm trying to find it on our page. It's on the homepage here. We did stream a few of the days of the TSCA EPA fluoride lawsuit that was happening. It was prosecuted by Michael Connett. The video's not the best. I was basically picking up their Zoom conference and restreaming that on YouTube. There's a couple audio issues, but we did have some people tuning in, so it's good to see the interest in what's happening there. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't think they've made a ruling yet, but it was very damning for the EPA. I thought just the little bits and pieces that I picked up. They had like 4 days of testimony and cross-exam and all that. I just didn't get the sense that the judge was really buying the EPA's position statements. But we'll see. And what jurisdiction this court actually has to make the EPA change their ways. I think they're probably just going to kick the can down the road, but still very positive movement for the anti-fluoride movement. You can check that out on our YouTube. And then the other thing was, Xavier, you posted a new article, Statistical Illusions, Paper Tigers, and Bear Markets, Oh My. And when you posted it, it really resonated with me because, and me and Orthogonal were talking about that before you joined, just the daily ritual of waking up and, turning on whatever, pick your news outlet. They've always got a new number to obsess and fear over, whether it's the new cases of cerveza virus or the new hospitalizations or whatever. And the ostensible purpose of all that is just to keep you in a state of fear. And, it's crazy how, to me, like they don't even put up a good illusion anymore. It's just like and that shows the degree to which they expect their constituents to be dumb. Because if you do any critical thinking about the numbers they present, they're not even concerning. I saw, as an example, woke up one day and here in North Carolina, they were talking about 915 hospitalizations related to COVID. And even that number and the related part is kind of a key word because a lot of people are in the hospital for other reasons. They just happen to have cerveza virus. That's not why they're there. So there's that aspect. But even the numbers, do you know how many people live in North Carolina? There's over 10 million people here based on the official census numbers. That is fractions less than 1%. And we're supposed to just shut down completely for this. So you want to talk a little bit about your article here and some of the videos?
Definitely. So I compiled a list of videos where it shows the extent to which statistics and the numeric postulations therein have become the undebatable science du jour of these recent news events. And it goes to show how effective it is as a way of kind of rallying a perception around a certain event, even though the specifics of how the statistics are taken, all the different variables that you have to consider in any given study, the vast majority of the population does not have really a lot of critical awareness of the dangers of statistics.
Right.
And they just see statistics as this sort of tablature from on high that dictates reality to them. And it's really unfortunate because statistics is not a hard science. It is a very debatable method for coming to conclusions, actually. And people point to statistics here and there, and there's even a famous phrase by Mark Twain that says there's lies, there's damn lies,
and then there's
statistics.
It's like the worst lies of them all.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there is so much area for perceptual analytical wiggle room in how you decipher the data.
Right.
That most people just kind of go with whatever the Delphi method representative of the day dictates.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, a family member of mine posted something on Instagram, and it was very, white guilt BLM oriented, right? And there was it was like a multi-slide thing, and on one of the slides, it started using statistics about people of color, black people who go to hospitals to give birth. And the statistics stipulated that, I think, and I'm probably misquoting it, and that's part of the problem, right, is people just start throwing around these numbers as if it is, like the Code of Hammurabi in stone. Right. And the statistic was, like 4 times more black women die in hospitals giving birth than white women. Okay, so that might be a true statistic. It might be. But then the conclusion was because of racism. And I'm like, how are you going to simplify? I mean, any doctor worth his salary, there's a multifactorial evaluation process to any death that happens, right? So it could have been hemorrhaging because of, they have a pre-existing condition that, they just hemorrhage. Some people do, some people don't. Could have been a number of things contributing to the death. How do you just synthesize the statistic, juxtapose white versus black, and then conclude? I mean, it doesn't even consider the possibility that there are black healthcare workers giving birth care to other blacks. Sure. And they die in that case. Does that count in the statistic? No, of course not. So it was really a valid point and good timing, just because of how they're using statistics now to reinforce the dogma around shutdown and the whole,
narrative of quote unquote systemic racism. And we can get into that later on in the discussion, but I mean, ultimately, this article is basically showing that you can convince a huge amount of people with data that has all kinds of small misleading elements within the study. If it's statistical analysis, again, it goes back to our broader discussions in previous episodes about chartism and Cartesian reductionism of worldly phenomena, and how we have to sort of suspend our critical understanding of specifics in order to come to a sort of generalized conclusion about something. And there's always going to be epistemological shortfalls in doing that. And unless there's an honest accounting of those shortfalls, it's a duplicitous enterprise.
Right.
And unfortunately, most of the population has been conditioned to accept these figures and these charts and these tabulations as sort of the pinnacle investment of all of the overpayment within the sciences that's been happening for generations now. So I think that there's a willingness to believe the numbers because there's a willingness to assert that everyone is doing the best they can,
right?
And everyone is just going with the methods that they've been trained to do, and that's kind of the end of the story in the public mind is you just obey the experts, just bow before the altar of the white coat. I mean, they know better than you about anything you could possibly learn about. So
heroes work here.
Right.
I saw a heroes work here sign outside of CVS, and I'm like, why? What
really?
Could you guys give flu shots? How about you fuck off? Like, unbelievable. Yeah. What do you think about this schizophrenia now? So we talked about they're gonna shut down again. Shut down 2.0. They're gonna claim another spike, and sure enough, they did. But they didn't. They didn't. The obvious conclusion, if you're in that belief system about the spread and the curve, right? All these people going out to demonstrate, elbow to elbow. Your grandma can't have a funeral, but George Floyd can have 5 funerals in different cities, and everybody can attend that. That's not to do with the spike, but they're, I guess the reopened people who were protesting, they're shitheads and they're spreading the disease and they're degenerates and all of that. I mean, it's gotten to a level where you have to be brain dead to believe this stuff.
All right, and to not see it for what it is, which is a political polarization psyop on so many different levels. I mean, now it's no longer about, we can have a friendly, agree to disagree difference in political position. You have this, more traditional angle or conservative angle. I have a little bit more of a progressive sort of authoritarian angle. It's no longer just sort of verbal disagreements. Now there is a visual moniker that is placed over people who accept a certain narrative and despise those who don't, and vice versa. And so I think at the end of the day, it is an election year. We have seen a repeat pattern of these virus scares cropping up in election cycles. It's almost like clockwork, and here we are again this year, except it's now on steroids. And it's about 20 times more involved than it ever was in previous years. And the whole controversy around masks and shutdowns and so-called herd immunity and asymptomatic prevention and all this stuff. What you really have to understand is that there is a bigger geopolitical force that is wanting to keep all of this in place as is. And we've touched on that in previous episodes as well. Just the last one, citing even one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Rush, who was able to forecast this problem long before there was any kind of massive corporate institutional worldwide organization around medicine and the policies therein. So I think that what we're seeing is a sort of mass forgetting of the political dangers of just sort of allowing medical authoritarianism to sort of trump any further investigation into the interests of those contingencies that are pushing these medicalist policies. So I think what we see is this just huge psychological operation that's taken place, and it's ultimately more than a psychological operation. It is a putsch. It's a worldwide economic effort to restructure. It's a political revolution to unseat any kind of due process or congressional representation or just kind of level-headed debate about these issues. It's sprung everything into hysterics and thanatoid hyperbole and blood libel, and it's just this massive polarization effort within on just a rhetorical level, let alone the actual facts on the ground.
I'm trying to find excuse me, I'm trying to find this clip. I can find multiple articles about it, but in New York County, they're threatening subpoenas to residents who refuse contact tracing. And in this case, I'm trying to find the clip because the lady reporting had so much vitriol about people who had a party. That literally they had 3 large parties have been identified, and they're going around asking people, and many of them are like, I'm not telling you who's at the party. But they did get like 1 name or 2 names. And so now they're just on this, this tear to find ways to legally, through color of law, use existing law. I saw, we had this debate, Orthogonal, right? Because at my pool, we're private members of a private pool club, and they're trying to reopen in phase reopening or whatever, trying to, I guess, give some sort of sense of security to their members, or maybe they're just complying with what the government says. In any case, they're implementing some of the dumbest, requirements of their guests. So I have to wear a mask coming through the clubhouse to get to the pool. I don't go in the clubhouse. I'm literally, it's narrower than this room we're in right now. The area that I have to walk through to get to the pool, I'm allowed to take it off right when I get on the other side. And they have someone up front to sort of, ninny you about wearing it. And of course, they don't even care if you wear it right. They've got somebody sitting at the desk wearing like below their nose, right. And I'm supposed to wear it through this clubhouse and then take it off. And then everybody is standing around the pool and in the pool breathing all over each other. Not that I care, but you get my point, like it's so ridiculous. So we're arguing about this. Like, he's like, fuck that pool. And I'm like, to a certain extent, I'm like, yeah, like, why would they just, bend over? Like, it's clearly not protecting anybody. So why put your members through that?
Just stop the charade, right?
And he's like, well, it would be, Orthogonal was like, well, it'd be pretty easy for them to just say no. And I'm like, well, would it? You've got these government authoritarians like threatening to close you down. And by what means? Oh, they'll just fine you or ticket you. But then it's like, under what auspice? None of this has been legislated.
Yeah, so it's important to point out that, pool clubs in neighboring counties, specifically mine in Durham County, their pools weren't even allowed to open. So their summer clubs will be closed throughout the whole season. So, there's clubs that are not open for business at all.
Yeah, that's the justification for doing anything silly like that, is fear of just being closed.
Right. And it's wild because this is basically a backdoor snitch society effort that's been rolled out. Because now you have all these people who are really gung-ho mask wearers feeling slighted by people who have the temerity.
The temerity, yeah. And it's like, but the enforcement is the most interesting aspect to me about this, because how the pool can say they require it, but a lot of these places, they're customer service oriented. If they piss me off too bad, I'm going to take my money elsewhere, and they don't want that. They're already hurting for the money. So I've just gone in various stores without the mask. Mm-hmm. Nobody said anything. I get the dirty looks and stuff like that. But how is the government supposed to enforce that? They have to turn the business owners into the enforcers, and if they're not willing to comply with that, then they're dead in the water. But I saw an article, I can't find it right now, but it was one or the other government municipalities explaining how we are going to get this to work. And they said that business owners can use trespassing law to enforce mask wearing. So basically, we can't make you wear a mask essentially, but we can prevent you from frequenting our establishment, and then you become a trespasser. And based on they have the right to do that, but whether they will or not, that's a whole other thing altogether.
Well, and they're also comparing it to seat belts. You had this case in Alamance County where this Ace Speedway wanted to, open up and resume, and there was actually like large crowds coming out, and it sort of resembled something out of 2019, and sure enough, the judge there enforced them to shut back down, basically citing the seatbelt law as something that needed to be heeded in relation to the mask wearing, because there were people coming in there and they weren't spacing out crazily, and there were crowds, and people were just sitting down just like they have at every race.
Is this the one you're talking about where they build their race as a peaceful protest to get around the cerveza virus regulations?
This was a peaceful gathering in solidarity with George Floyd. I believe that's how it was marketed at the raceway.
Well, yeah, there were people who were repping that as well, but there was also just the Speedway wanting to kind of open up as well. I think they had been open for a couple weeks prior to this, but then the governor, of course, wanted to shut it down because they weren't taking in any of these measures. And it's it's an established raceway with infrastructure. It's not just out on the streets, of course. So he was able to get this judge to basically, agree and say, yeah, I mean, we're all in this together to fight this virus this year, and it is causing a lot of hardship. But at the end of the day, when government instated seatbelt laws, there were plenty of people who resisted. And even today, we can't fully enforce seatbelt laws, but if we catch you, we can fine you.
Right.
So now this is becoming this sort of rolled in legal precedent of, oh yeah, masks are like seatbelts. Okay, let's unpack that implication right quick. So the body is a deadly vehicle, and your breath is a lethal weapon.
Yeah. I mean, essentially. How about HIPAA with respect to...
Yeah, that was on the tip of my tongue, that all of these measures being put into place, or these recommendations and guidelines, rather, because like you mentioned, these aren't law. Like, none of this has been legislated. This is engineering consent and getting all these policies into the workplace. So, when it comes time for, Moderna to finally roll out their vaccine, it becomes... just part and parcel with, being able to enter the workplace. You have to have a vaccine. But, in regards to the seatbelt, I understand there's a social movement to defund the police and do away with them. So, who's going to issue these tickets?
Right. Getting back to the schizophrenia, I get why some of the BLM agitators and whatnot are trying to defund the police. That I understand. But then I see the very Democratic controlled governments who instituted this draconian lockdown do an about face. Who are you going to get to enforce it? I mean, are you politicians going to actually take up arms again? It's such an impossible job, which underscores your point, which you've been making not just in your latest article, but since this came about. What a paper tiger it really is. And that's why I enjoy not wearing a mask, because I want someone to have a conversation with me, and I'll tell them my doctor has told me that it's not good for me. What are they going to say? What are they going to say to that? Well, who's your doctor? It's not your business.
Right.
Yeah. Does it matter? I thought we had the right to choose our doctor. Mm-hmm. So it's like the religion thing. I have made religious objection to some TSA encroachments, which, by the way, now I'm going to make, social distance objection as well, nullifying there. But I've been asked before, I object to pat down for religious reasons. Well, what religion are you? It doesn't matter. It's not your business. I can worship however the fuck I want.
Right.
I can go to whatever doctor I want. I happen to be my own doctor, so I'm not going to say that, but I will say, my doctor says this is bad for me, so I'm not, I'm not going to. What are they going to say?
That's an excellent point. Because until they de-legislate or nullify HIPAA,
right?
Technically, there's nothing anyone can do except scowl and attempt to beat you up in trying to force.
And
you
that's
to
really
comply.
happening.
Right.
That's really happening.
It goes beyond that because I will add that one of the reasons that I did not want to return to the workplace is because I don't want to put up with this medical security theater. I'm not gonna have a mask on my face for the duration of my workday, and I'm certainly not gonna have a unqualified, unprofessional health official that may or may not be my employer asking me ridiculous health screening questions and then putting a thermometer against my head
totally
every single time I have to come to work.
That's
that's just
unreal.
utter ridiculous. But it's worse than that and more pernicious because as you both know, I've been collecting unemployment throughout this entire Cerveza crisis due to the shutdown,
right?
And I have to file per my state and fill out a questionnaire that's yes or no, did you look for work this week? But sometimes the questions changed and there's different questions, and one time specifically it asked me if I had a medical condition that would prevent me from returning to work, and I kind of sat on that question for a while, because I was thinking, is this really any of your business? And, I had to answer the question to receive my benefits check. I could have opted to, put it on hold and try to traverse the unemployment insurance system. And, lots of people have been having really great luck with that. So
let's kind of
there's plenty of other ways of obtaining that information, whether or not you have a medical exemption, and those exemptions are becoming
well, on that note, I mean, this is the point about HIPAA, is we're supposed to have some semblance of privacy to our healthcare, to our financial matters. That's a very sensitive topic with big corporations. Data privacy, data breaches, data hacks, all that stuff is extremely damaging to a company. Why? Well, because it's your private fucking information. It's your business. It's not anybody else's. But it seems like overnight almost, your health state, your state of health is everybody's business. And this passport is like the most disgusting, the hell. And for you, those of you listening, we are an interactive program with a video component. You can check us out on YouTube or on Zetetic.news. We've been, pulling up articles to stimulate our conversation. And right now I've got one about a vaccination passport. The EU and of course the US authorities as well are discussing behind closed doors. How do we manage this pandemic with, an identity, and it's such a technical problem. Let's maybe just call up Bill Gates. I'm sure he's got.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, they're definitely the inevitability of a vaccine is on the tips of everybody's tongue. I mean, I'm amazed at how just robotically everybody is. I say everybody, not everybody, but many people are just anticipating this. Well, we can't get back to normal until we have a vaccine. Y'all think we're going to be back to normal after a vaccine? After everybody is like, their IQ gets destroyed and or their fertility.
Immune systems themselves, the gut bacteria, and it just gets destroyed
after Microsoft Office gets deployed inside your body.
Absolutely.
It's a subscription service. You better pay your credits or you're going to be turned off.
Was necessary to overcome the 1918 Spanish flu. Not to say that didn't come with costs, because lots of people died, but obviously we're still here talking about it right now.
Well, Xavier brought up a good point about that the electric grid came online, to a large extent. It was high, it was much more broadly developed in that time range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
radio towers, all that stuff really started.
And I'm sure they did long-term studies on the health effects of that before they started industrializing that way, right? They did that, right? No, if you're listening to audio only, encourage you to go over to Zetetic.news and check out the video component. Speaking of just the authoritarian measures, and we were talking about enforcement before. This is actually in Forsyth County, North Carolina. And here we have this, again, the schizophrenia on display. When everybody's so obsessed with racism and this and that, you would think that this police officer would be a little more sensitive to this guy's right to not wear a mask. But check this out.
Good Lord. Stop, you're going to the ground. You understand me? Put your hand behind your back. Put your hand behind your back.
What the hell? Okay, what the fuck?
Jimmy, hurry up, please. Jimmy.
You think he's breathing on him? I mean, I know he's got a mask on, but I mean, he's not keeping his social distance by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh no, he's being very forceful.
What the fuck?
And look at this guy back here, just standing there watching that. Like, I guess he feels protected. I'm glad he's putting that mask on him.
Classic bystander effect. This is how they want the entire society to become.
Stop! I know. Stop! Better stop now. Stop! Better stop, bro. Stop! Get off me, bro. You either stop now. Stop. Come on, man. Come on.
I've been minding my business.
I know, you were asking me.
Nobody asked me to leave. You start following me, harassing me, bro. Get your hands off me.
Put your hands behind your back now. Put your hands behind your back. Put your phone up. Come on, man.
For what?
Don't video that.
Don't video this.
I guess this store doesn't want this dude's money. Like, if I was the store owner, I would be like, sir, police officer.
What are you doing?
What the fuck are you doing?
Okay.
But clearly they've called this guy to remove this guy from the store because he said it. He's been asked to leave.
Yeah, I mean, was the cop already there? They certainly had to wait for the officer to be dispatched. It
Maybe he's like a school resource officer. He's just standing around somewhere.
Is this like in a? It looks like kind of in an industrial warehouse type setting, unless I'm seeing the ceiling differently.
It looks like a discount shoe store.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an outlet
Yeah.
of
This looks like almost
some type.
It's like
No, I keep recording him. What do you mean? He been sitting here with
Yeah, you're not supposed to video in here.
Don't make none of that.
Put your phone
What the
up.
hell you mean?
Hey, y'all grab my phone with me. Please. No, not you. I'm talking to her.
We got it.
I'm talking. No, I want her to have my phone.
We got it.
Come
Give me
on, man.
your phone.
Man,
it's horrible.
unbelievable.
Horrible.
I'm just waiting for the day that's going to happen to me.
Oh,
for not wearing a mask.
Oh God. And then it's the whole sort of force majeure of like, this is something that we're all just that they're trying to acclimate everyone to, is getting harassed or getting beat up at a moment's notice for the most benign thing you can imagine. Like just keeping your distance, washing, and not wearing a mask. I mean, the thing is, there's been so much conflicting advice, quote unquote, and guidelines, whether it's from the CDC or the WHO, as to like who the masks really benefit, and we shouldn't actually wear hospital grade masks because those are for the workers. That's I mean, even NPR admits this stuff.
So if you're listening, we've got a headline from NPR: mounting evidence suggests COVID not as deadly as thought. Did the experts fail again?
Oh,
yeah. I think the climate change experts just became surveysivirus experts. You know,
Well,
what I
they
mean?
actually had Greta Thunberg on
Yeah, he beat me to
CNN.
it.
What?
Yeah, you didn't see that? She was on a CNN town hall panel. It was about a month ago.
Yeah, it was within the past month. It was
or
in
so,
June.
But yeah, I mean, so hopefully we get some new Greta sound bites here.
Oh yeah, we'll get them here momentarily.
Is this it?
Yes, that's. Mm-hmm.
What's this little asp you got to say?
Something you talk about online too is just how important it is to listen to experts and listen to.
Wow.
Right, if you could,
She's an
when I was
expert?
in school, but this is a time it seems that the global scientific community is so critically important, and we're really seeing just how important it is to follow science.
Yes, exactly, and I hope that we can see now that the scientific community are stepping up, and they are speaking up more than they're done before, because obviously this is a crisis that require the scientific community to speak up, and I hope that people really, it feels like science is getting, the role of science is changing now. It's becoming more, people are starting to realize that we are actually depending on science and that we need to listen to scientists and experts, and I really hope that that stays, and that also is for other crises such as the climate crisis and the environmental
Wow,
crisis.
she says it right there.
Right there.
She's hoping that this gets people so scared that they just go along with whatever the scientists say. Just listen to them and follow them. Follow the science.
I'm tempted to ask you to play that again. I mean, she said absolutely nothing. I mean, she said science or something.
The only thing she did say was that confirmed what we suspected, and that is
Right.
that the climate change apocalypticists are just banking on the response to COVID benefiting their supposed cause.
What did Rahm Emanuel say?
Never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's exactly, yeah. Yeah, actually, there was, that reminds me, there was, I don't even know who. Yeah, I love CNN's advertisement. Do you want us to tell you our version? Yeah. But Joe Rogan had this total shill on the other day.
Jon Stewart?
And Barbara Fries. I don't know what her background is, but I want to play this clip. Here we go. This, Xavier, have you seen this?
I have
This
not
is
seen
pretty
this.
recent, so this is gonna blow your mind.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Pleasure to meet you.
How did you get started on this, and how did you get interested in the subject?
I got interested in this subject through climate change.
This is not the clip. Here it is. The state of climate change action with Barbara Fries, and I think this will be pretty illustrative of the point we were making before.
This was just yesterday.
Yes, right.
Rogan Experience.
What you're doing with this book is essentially you have a magnifying glass on some of the worst aspects of human behavior. Is it depressing?
Kind of. It's kind of depressing. I've also had people tell me the book is infuriating, which, I really didn't intend that. I kind of thought, well, let me tell you, when I first imagined this book, I imagined that we were going to go through climate denial. We were going to snap out of it because it was so obviously suicidal. And then we were going to look around and go, whew, how did that happen? And how do we make sure that never happens again? And I would be able to say, look, here are some factors that have contributed to this throughout history, and here's, maybe this will lead to some reforms. And obviously it didn't work out that way. This book has come out when we have a climate denier running the country.
Is it really a climate denial?
He has called it a hoax several times. Now, I think maybe he's been talked out of using that term lately, but he's still pushing back the regulations
So he really said
trying to read
climate
that.
change is a hoax?
I said that several times, and I know at least in one tweet, maybe more, a Chinese hoax that China was trying to perpetrate on us. So in any event, I wrote an infuriating book. I didn't mean to. I meant to write a kind of let's all step back and look at this sort of book. But it just turns out you cannot write about infuriating topics without writing a kind of infuriating book. I do try to keep some perspective here and look at the good parts of this history, which is to say, in each case, you have members of the public, you have scientists, you have journalists, you have movements stepping up and confronting that denial, and eventually, in most cases, overcoming it. And we do have other segments of our society that are designed to try to not just pursue profit, but to seek truth, like scientists and journalists. And that doesn't mean they're not also trying to pursue profit sometimes, or at least to get paid for their work. But, we do have systems in place that have successfully confronted this. And so it's not like we're starting from scratch. We are just in a very big hole right now, and particularly about climate change, and particularly with so much corporate power over Congress and frankly, the states as well.
What subjects where you see there's actually progress been made?
Well, people have been fighting climate change on the state level, and we have done some things also federally for a long time over the years. I mean, many states have put in place climate targets to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Many have put in place renewable energy standards, which have been enormously successful in building up the wind industry, the solar industry, and those technologies, as they deploy and improve, have gotten so much cheaper. I mean, it's really much easier now to imagine getting rid of fossil fuels than it was, 40 years ago when the industry first confronted this, or when society first really started looking at this. And on the federal level, they've made major improvements they've required efficiency standards, which have been really helpful for major appliances. We've had auto efficiency standards. Now, Obama put some strong ones in place. Trump has rolled those back again, so that's going to limit the progress exactly when it needs to be accelerated. So that's maybe not one of the good pieces of news you were asking about. We have, I think that's going to be largely the focus. And even though Trump has said we're not going to be part of the Paris Agreement anymore, which, by the way, every other country in the world, is a part of. There's a handful that haven't ratified it, but everybody else is part of it. Even though he said that, you have many states and many cities stepping forward and saying, well, we are still part of it, and we are going to be working to reduce our emissions. So,
So this
Right
gets
there.
to probably, it's a good segue to the next major topic I think we want to talk about, and that's civil war. We kind of touched on it before when we were talking about the local authorities pushing back on state authorities with respect to keeping their business open. But this is the other side of that coin, is you have Durham and Raleigh, for example, part of the
Orange County as well.
what is it, ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, which is basically
Agenda 21.
a local Paris agreement. And she's saying, as if it's a good thing that we have local municipalities instituting draconian industrial regulations, which ostensibly protect you from climate change, but if you don't believe that, this person is a deindustrialist sympathizer, a economic destroyer sympathizer. But for why?
Well, because it all goes back to the Malthusian depopulation agenda of, we wouldn't expend as many resources if there weren't as many people. So the best way to get nature happy again is to maybe cull the herd in a way that people enjoy the culling happening. They can pat themselves on the back and say, yes, this is for the greater good, and Mother Nature thanks us. Meanwhile, it's democide.
Right. Yeah, as people are starving, millions of them right now, as not just as a result of, the pervasive virus lockdowns, which no doubt are helping that along to a large extent, but just the gross inequality, that exists between the aristocrats and the rest of the population. That's what really drives me crazy about BLM and this transition from cerveza lockdown unity to total racial division and tribalism and civil war.
Right. I mean, and I'll just bring the author's name up, Frantz Fanon, who was a sort of a protege of John Paul Sartre back in the 1940s and 50s, wrote The Wretched of the Earth, in which he advocates for a totalitarian reparationist state and Euricidal communism. Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon. People call him a Marxist, but he's more of an existentialist. He's more influenced by Heidegger and Sartre, and really influenced Foucault after him. It's pretty wild. If you look at the foreword by Jean Paul Sartre, he praises Frantz Fanon for advocating the purgative, cathartic aspect of violence and its necessity in promulgating a lumpen proletariat revolution based on race. Okay, so these ideas have been around for a long time. They've been fetishized by the world academic elite, and they've just been sitting on the back burner for a long time. Even this is pre-civil rights. This is basically and Frantz Fanon is a black writer, but he's basically servicing the ideology that he thinks is going to win out over, the more nobler aspirations of something like the civil rights movement.
We need to have a CNN book club, and we need to pick a book like this, read it, and then have an episode where we just talk about it.
Yeah,
I think that'd be awesome.
I think the book club is an excellent idea because, ultimately what we're basically providing free education that goes way beyond most of the media outlets and even a lot of the alt-right stuff.
Right.
We're giving you information that you're not going to find a lot of other places, and it's really pertinent, insightful stuff. So, Frantz Fanon, look at his relationship with Jean Paul Sartre. And Jean Paul Sartre and Foucault are also pedo sympathizers, guys.
Yeah, I've certainly come across that in Foucault's work. Definitely. It gets really weird. Touching upon the Marxist component of, this so-called revolution that's taking place, I think, that's what's important to call it what it is that, this is a Marxist attempt to overthrow the executive branch, and definitely. I think that's really interesting how, initially after the death of George Floyd, it was quite apparent that police were going to be on the receiving end of, the movement, that, this movement was going to reform police, and it's very quickly morphed into, a target on the executive branch. And,
it's amazing. Alex Jones, I've heard so many different rants from him talking about how at first the police will be militarized, then they'll be set against the Patriots, then there will be a civil war, and all the police will be and military will be mopped up for the global police force, which is probably robots.
To a great extent.
And he was so right about that, and we see so many of those different trajectories intersecting here in 2020.
The probabilities are certainly collapsing, as we arrive and exist in year zero here. But a group like Black Lives Matter, the double talk in a movement like that, when someone says Black Lives Matter or do Black Lives Matter, absolutely, yeah, that's something that's a sign I can put in my front yard.
And no one's going to disagree.
Sure.
It's just like climate change.
Exactly.
Because nobody denies that climate changes.
Right.
But the institution Black Lives Matter, when you look at that, again, it's a Marxist institution, and, two of the founding members, this comes by their own admission, Alicia Garza and Patrice Cullors, that they are trained Marxists.
Well versed in Marxist racial theories.
Yeah, they don't even deny it. And it's their manifesto reads like Marxist manifesto.
Well, right.
Probably lifted from it.
Yeah, it is to a great extent borrowed. The abolition of the family unit. That's the Black Lives Matter platform.
That's exterministic.
It is, but this has the crumbs that go all the way back to Jacques Derrida and the darling of the Yale English department, and you talk about how this is been on the back burner, pre-civil rights. This has been simmering, this conflict, and it's been in academia. This radical Marxist ideology and the infiltration of the humanities department, and these people are in full subscription of this idea, and whether or not it's fully understood, and we have so much historical context and documents of how this is going to play out,
right?
And regardless of their extent to understand this, when the fragments unite, the ideology is going to act itself out, and it's going to result in just unimaginable loss of human life and suffering, because lo and behold, it always turns out that there is a productive class of people. I'm never suggesting that something should be done with an unproductive class,
right?
And through this production is how wealth is distributed. And I'm not talking about living in a mansion or having a car. I'm talking about eating and drinking water and
well, that's what was so funny at the same time concerning with the Chaz situation, the CHOP situation, right? And we predicted it. We talked about how there's going to be, when depending on how long they shut down these commercial real estate, empires, these sprawling strip malls and mega malls, you're going to have squatter populations basically taking those buildings over. They're thinking in their head, well, I'm entitled to this because I've been deprived of it my entire life, shelter.
Right.
And it's going to be little favelas, third world, little civilizations, and with their own borders, their own warlords. And that's exactly what happened in Seattle.
Yeah.
And very quickly, they were ill prepared to survive.
Of course.
They didn't even think about the fact that they were trying to set up a country on a block of urban landscape. Like, they tried to grow some crops, quote unquote, if you could see my fake quotes, and they had like cardboard with soil on top,
right?
And then they put the cups, that they got, I guess somebody brought them from a nursery or something, on top of the soil. They didn't even take them out of the cups, some of them,
right? And
I'm just like, these people are either going to steal to survive, or they're going to be starving in a week.
Right.
And, we've talked about probability alternatives with the collapse and civil war and so on. And I think you're going to have some geographies that are sort of self-secure. They've got their own community defense mechanisms. They've got their own, agriculture capacities and domain knowledge within the community that allows them to sort of maybe even thrive in this scenario. But then you're going to have these roving gangs coming from the city who will eventually start fighting with themselves.
Sure.
They're going to become, there's no honor among thieves. They're going to steal what they can while they can, but eventually the resources are going to be sort of pooled in different caches, and then it's going to be sort of like, it's going to depend on where you are. what
Yeah.
you experience. But the people who are like out there kicking statues down and stuff,
Right.
they're not gonna last long.
No. And
well, some of them didn't last at all. If you looked at our dude in Richmond, you stood right up underneath that statue, and they pulled it right on him. He was put into a coma. I don't know.
Sorry. So I don't know if it's real visible, but for those watching, we're playing a clip where this guy gets hit in the head with a statue. And back it up. Here we go. Oh, this guy right here? Oh, man. Dude.
Yeah, he's
He's probably still out. Yeah.
easily.
But
Ouch.
Well, I saw the folks in D.C., they were trying to pull down, I think, Jefferson, and they couldn't. Like some of these guys, they're so dumb, they couldn't even manage to do this right.
Well, it doesn't even end there. The 54th Confederate Regiment Memorial was destroyed, or not, pardon me, defaced, with graffiti, the all-black Civil War regiment. It's just...
Matthias Baldwin, one of the first abolitionists, right? Or early abolitionists.
Yeah. He fought for the abolition of slavery like 30 years before it happened.
Right.
And, they just ruined that statue.
Amazing.
Because, and that's what it is going to eventually manifest in, because historically we know that after the statues they come for the people,
right?
Well, and they'll come for the any religious symbol that depicts something that doesn't fit their narrative. So,
you mean the state?
And Trump said it a while back that they will not stop at the Confederate monuments.
No.
They
oh
won't.
no.
Are you kidding me?
Oh no.
But you know what's funny is I saw a breakdown of the percentage of actual monuments which have been destroyed state by state, and there are thousands of them. So it's like, how far are you guys going to take this? I don't think they're even going to get rid of all the statues before they start coming after the people. But
they already have.
They already have, right?
They already are.
Well, there's that the whole St. Louis McCloskey incident.
Ken and Karen.
Yeah.
Oh, let's play a clip from CNN.
Yeah, it's all, you're going to see it in the interview. They play the clips.
So if you're just listening, head over to Zetetic.news. You can watch this clip. This is CNN reporting. Chris Cuomo he's interviewing. The guy's name is not really Ken. I think it's Mark, but he's the gentleman who, with his wife, were pictured pointing their guns at BLM protesters who busted down their gate and were basically starting to flow into their courtyard.
Yes.
Right?
They were not on public streets. It was a private gated community, and the gates were destroyed. And, it's being said that they were en route to the mayor's house or something like that. There was... it's explained in this interview, but it's pointed out that you cannot access this location through this property.
Right. So let's check it out.
Now joined by Mark McCloskey. He is the St. Louis homeowner we told you about in that video that's all over social media. He and his wife holding guns, keeping protesters away, in their opinion, from their home on a private street. He is an attorney, and the couple also has outside counsel who joins us now, Albert Watkins. Thank you both for joining me. Indeed. Counselor and Mr. McCloskey / counselor, we can talk about the legal rights and the facts. But I want to talk about not having a right, but whether or not something is right first, which is, how do you feel about becoming the face of political resistance to the Black Lives Matter movement?
What?
First of all, that's a completely ridiculous statement. I'm not the face of anything opposing the Black Lives Matter movement. I was a person scared for my life, who was protecting my wife, my home, my hearth, my livelihood. I was a victim of a mob that came through the gate I didn't care what color they were. I didn't care what their motivation was. I was frightened, I was assaulted, and I was in imminent fear that they would run me over, kill me, burn my house. And you have to have this in the context of St. Louis, where on June the 2nd of this year, I watched the city burn. I watched the 7-Eleven get smashed in, looted, and burned for 40 minutes on live television with nobody showing up to do anything. And I realized at that time we're on our own. When bad things happen, they unpredictably turn really bad, real fast. That same night, retired St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn was murdered. These things get very bad very quickly, and when those people came through the gate, when it was a mob, I didn't take the time to see their birth certificates or anything else. I was defending my house, my life, my wife, and what I've spent 32 years building there.
I understand what you say your rationale was. To be clear, did anything happen to you or your property?
Yes.
Did anything happen to, yeah, my life has been ruined. I'm the target.
We'll get to that, Mr. McCloskey. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm saying that night, did anything happen to you, your family, or your property?
Yeah, it's called social intimidation. It's called terrorism. Chris, what's the definition of terrorism? To use violence and intimidation to frighten the public. That's what was happening that night. It's what happened to me, and that's the damage I suffered.
You were the one pointing a loaded weapon at a group of people who were walking past looking for the mayor's house as a point of protest.
No, I'm doing Chris, that's an entirely false concept. No single media outlet has ever mentioned the complete falsity of that statement. The mayor's house cannot be reached through my neighborhood. Lyda Cruson lives up on a road called Lake and Washington. That's 3 blocks north and a half a mile west of my house.
So where do you think they were going?
They were going through a private neighborhood for the intention of going through a private neighborhood, in my humble opinion. In retrospect, at the time I didn't have any time to think about this. However, the leader of the entity called Expect Us that organized this, whatever it was, announced ahead of time that he does not want to have a peaceful protest. He wants to have it be as disruptive as possible. And when interviewed subsequently, he said, I know it was illegal, I know it was a private neighborhood, but when you're doing protests of this nature, it's necessary to break the law to get your ends met. And that's what was happening. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that hundreds of people screaming, shouting, angry, broke through the private gate. Everything inside that gate is private property.
Right.
Any pretense of
demonstration,
protest
as opposed to terrorism ended when they broke through that gate.
Terrorism is a strong word, Counselor, don't you think? I mean, let's stipulate for the point of this conversation
Chris,
that they went through the private. Look, I let you make your points. Let the rejoinders happen, and then you can go.
Sure.
Sure. You got counsel with you. You're safe. I promise. The idea that they broke the law, I give it to you. They went through a private gate. I'm sure you have video of it, or somebody can prove that. I stipulate they went through the gate. But they're yelling, they're angry. They did not go up your steps. They didn't go to your house. They didn't touch you. They didn't try to enter your home. They didn't try to do anything to your kids. But you say you were assaulted. You're using the civil definition of that, which is that you had the apprehension that something bad was going to happen to you, but nothing did. But to call it terrorism, when the people are there protesting how the community is treated by the police, is a little bit of reverse psychology at a minimum, is it not?
No. You're absolutely wrong. The reason why they did not get up my steps was that my wife and I were there with weapons to keep them off our steps.
How do you know?
Because they were coming at us until I displayed the weapon, and that stopped them. I came out.
So do you wait? I'm sure a house like that. I'm sure a house like that has cameras. Do you have video of them coming up the steps and being in your house?
I'm not going to discuss the level of my private security on national television. That's not a topic.
But do you have proof of them actually approaching your house?
You know, Chris, this is not a Black Lives Matter movement issue. This is a matter of not just one discussion that we have to have. You said we have to have a discussion, and we do. And every melanin-challenged old white man like me needs to listen and hear the message of Black Lives Matter. What the second part of this discussion is, and it's not mutually exclusive, is the rights, constitutional rights, of each and every citizen in this land that can't be compromised without recognizing that the message of Black Lives Matter will cease to have any meaning at all.
But who is
Because
breaking?
without
But,
it, we have
but
anarchy.
how does that justify what happened here, Counselor?
What
I'm not,
happened-
I'm
yeah,
not saying that
let's
he didn't
talk
have
about
a right
justification.
to say that they entered a private street, but they were protesting, and he has become the face. How so? The president retweeted this for a reason, Counselor.
He became the face involuntarily.
But I'm not saying it was voluntary. I'm saying, why do you think the president
I
retweeted
know.
it,
So,
Counselor?
look, you can talk all night. You're gonna let me answer. The
Well, I
fact
just
of the
asked you a
matter is
question.
my
Answer it.
client-
Why do
my
you think the
client- my
president
client
retweeted
had-
it?
Oh, that's a separate question.
No,
I
that's the
can't
one I'm
speak
asking.
for. Well, that's a second question.
Maybe you should ask the president.
Maybe, here, you should ask the president.
He
I am
doesn't
not
answer
going
my
to ever-
questions, but he answers
I'm not
by his
going
actions.
to answer.
I go.
I'm not going to speak for the president. In fact, quite frankly, I find it probably an impossibility for anyone to speak for the president. And that's assuming one wants to say the president speaks.
I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Mr. McCloskey, this is what I'm saying. The president retweeted this thing for a reason. Why do you think he retweeted it?
You know, I don't have any idea why the president retweeted it. I've not seen it, not seen the retweet. I think you ought to ask the president. And if he, you know, I was reluctant to come on your.
He deleted it.
I was reluctant to come on your show for a similar reason. But let me say this: you said it was protesting police brutality. That's absolutely inaccurate. The announced purpose for this event was to ask the mayor, Lyda Crewson, whose own husband was murdered in her driveway in that same house years ago, in front of her and her kids. Okay, that's how undangerous these things are. The alleged purpose of this event was to ask her to resign for doxing protesters.
Right.
But guess what? Have I been doxed? Have those very people that were walking down my street screaming death threats at me and threatening to burn my house and kill my dog, and what rooms in my house they were going to live in after they killed me? Do you think them then distributing my information all over the Western Hemisphere is different than what they're asking the mayor to resign for doing? This hypocrisy is just obvious nonsense.
Look, again, Mr. McCloskey, I don't like that you have been weaponized for political means. I'm not saying that you weren't within your rights to do what you were doing. That will be judged by the system. That's not why I'm having you on the show, as I said at the top. And you said I didn't want to come on the show. Listen, I think I'm fair. I'm not going to use you as a pawn to advance my own agenda like the show you just went on, which is where somebody wants people to see Black Lives Matter as inimical to the American cause. I don't make those kinds of judgments for people. But the guy who just walked past your house on the looping piece of video had hands up, don't shoot on this. The stated purpose of this demonstration, and that's all we can go on, is that they didn't like that the mayor outed, or as you say, doxed people who were defunding the police. And now you can like that or not like that, but you have been used and politically weaponized as a face of white resistance to that movement. And that's why I asked you that. Not because that's how you see yourself, but that's how you're being seen.
Wow, that's fucking crazy. I haven't seen that video before.
I don't see
where she's on the lawn.
I don't see how you could see that as an unfair question.
My client has, since the very outset of this publicity, made it really, really clear the last thing he wanted to do, and he and his wife are both appalled at the prospect of being utilized as a rallying call for people sitting in Barco loungers with a Confederate flag behind them and a 12 gauge in their hand. My clients have fought as lawyers for 3+ decades for the civil rights of people of color. My clients are completely behind and endorse the message of BLM. What they are not capable of doing is embracing the abject utilization of that noble message that we all need to hear over and over and over again as a license to rape, rob, pillage, bowl over all of our rights for a
None
man
of that
to have
happened
to
here,
worry.
by the way.
Oh, I beg your pardon. When you have a man and a wife on their property in their home in a full-on assault occurring by a mob.
Full-on assault. They're walking down the street in front of the house, Mr. Walker.
Chris, that's not correct.
Chris,
you don't have your facts
Chris,
correct.
I'm just looking at the video.
I've had enough. I mean, he is so intentionally obtuse. He is intentionally obtuse I think to probably knock him off kilter and get him
Sure.
emotional. I mean, Chris knows exactly what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
But I see what's going on. I see a much different picture than what Chris sees. I see that, and I'm like, Mark needs a couple more mags.
Right, and
He needs a couple, and the wife needs to be behind him.
Right.
Because I didn't see that video before where she's out on the lawn. I mean, she needs some training too, right? But man, that was a crazy scene. I had only seen on previous to this just now that one clip of him standing up there. She's like right by him, and then there's the guy passing the camera. I didn't see that she was like out there, and these people were just like streaming around. Insane, but CNN typical.
It's really alarming, if you ask me. Obviously, they didn't burn their house down or kill them or kill their dog, but I don't necessarily think that, the world would think any different of it, or certainly the United States, if that did happen, and they would just be a rich white family that got killed, because they live in a mansion, it's a nice house. I think it was built in 1912.
Yeah.
And
they spent 3 decades.
Yeah, they're stacking.
Dozens of millions of dollars restoring it. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting anybody gave that to them. Both of them have probably worked very hard for that. But, this is how it's going to play out. We are going to see destruction of people's private property, and we are going to see people get killed in their own homes. I mean, this already
within
happened.
the last 10 years, I've had conversations with people about my own gun ownership, and they find the idea that somebody would, invade your house and try to kill you indiscriminately, like a ludicrous idea, even though it happens routinely. And then what's crazy about this is it's not just, the psychopath or the degenerate criminal. It's a freaking gang of people, a mob of people. I think there were 100 people there, which is why I say he needs a couple more mags, because if it gets to the point of human waves, the 30 round mag's not gonna be enough. Why do you need 30 rounds? Well,
there's 100 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and Chris Cuomo totally denies. Like, he keeps saying, well, that didn't happen. You weren't assaulted. You weren't this. You weren't that. And it's like
just
because
gaslighting.
Because of the thing which you say he did wrong.
Right.
Interestingly.
That's really weird.
It's all about sowing invective about the intentions for ever bringing out a gun. See, it's this casuistic sophistry where he's trying to short circuit all of the rationality behind bringing out a gun and reducing it to a matter of, oh, there must be something wrong with that person's intention for bringing out a gun. Mm-hmm. So it's all about kind of using emotivistic bypasses in the accounting of a particular circumstance so as to manipulate popular opinion against someone who's clearly in their right.
Right.
But it's all about tar and feathering the perception of the intention.
Right.
And, Cuomo is versed in that. A lot of these other Jesuit-educated broadcasters, they do all this stuff. It's using casuistic temptation to draw out statements or claims that the person wouldn't necessarily initially have wanted to make. And he did it effectively in that broadcast, because you saw that older lawyer who was with him start to get on a bent where he was like, oh yes, please continue, yes, and he's like puckering his lips and like smacking his tongue.
Yeah.
He wants people to sort of make these more aggressive stances, because they know that something's being done in the argument and in the logic and in the presentation of the facts that pisses him off.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Right.
Is that lure tactic.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Jesuit educated, broadcasters and stuff. You sent this statement from the Loyola House Jesuit community, I guess, about George Floyd. You want to talk about this? What's going on with this statement?
And it's not just the Jesuits, of course. It's like, CARE, the Islamic relations, but it's also like Chabad, radical Orthodox Jews. They're all circling their wagons around creating the impression that you are a unfaithful, basically barbarian, if you don't have full sympathy for all of the aspirations of Black Lives Matter. And they use these sort of rallying cries within their religious organizations to signal to one another that yes, that this needs to be a new kind of tenet of our flock. Like, they all kind of need to have this inchoate racial sympathy.
So this is the Jesuits saying this.
Yeah, this is the Jesuits, but...
You also provided
right,
the Council on American Islamic Relations, a U.S.-based pro-Muslim group that enjoys close ties with Obama, announced they are joining the hashtag Black Lives Matter and calling for a revolution in the United States, and they plan on using this upcoming election to do so.
And there's also the Chabad rabbis saying that the best solution to all of these injustices are the Noahide laws. Oh, imagine that.
You know what's interesting about that is, even though my ancestors were enslaved by other white people, I don't hate white people because of that. But many Black Lives sympathizers, even if they are white, do hate white people because they ostensibly perpetuated slavery in the United States. But they ignore the fact that the blacks who were imported here as slaves were sold to them by Arabs, were they not?
Sure.
In many cases.
Yeah, and free blacks owned plenty of black slaves as well.
Right.
This point is often dismissed of being some substrate of colonialism. Have you all heard that argument before?
Oh, sure.
That, because oftentimes, though, the whole point that Arabs also participated in the slave trade isn't mentioned, but, when you make that point that Africans traded Africans,
right?
They will tell you that, this is some kind of internalization of racism as produced by colonialism, and it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah,
it
as
really
if
is silly.
I mean, how condescending is that, right? I mean, anyone of any race can see the benefits of free labor, right? I mean, at the end of the day, no one has a monopoly on being enslaved. Every single human race from time immemorial has been enslaved by every other race.
And in fact, we're still enslaved today, all of us, under various institutions.
Technotronic monetarism.
So William Ellison was a cotton gin maker and blacksmith in South Carolina, a former black slave who achieved considerable success in business before the American Civil War. He owned 63 black slaves, making him the largest of the 171 black slaveholders in South Carolina. So ostensibly, there in the other southern states, there were other black slave owners as well. But I guess he just was brainwashed by Whitey into the Whitey ways, and so we absolve him of any sort of culpability or his ancestors. I mean, I just don't... Where do you draw the line with reparations and getting your due for the injustices of the past? I think
let's not forget all of the Irish slaves and the Eastern European slaves.
We wouldn't get anything done, one of the most popular commodities in the world, coffee. If you look at that supply chain, what that looks like, we've corporatized the labor of third world indigenous people, and
that's right.
I've worked in that industry for a while, and I've actually met some of the owners of, trigger alert, these coffee plantations, and it's a coffee plantation owned by a brown person or person of color that has other brown people and people of color working for them for far less money. I mean, you want to talk about a gross disparity. I mean, this person had traveled to America and he's talking to my dumb ass, and these people are, I lose more money in a day than these people make. It's
Right.
just ridiculous. But, you know, we've romanticized this. You know, we brew our
Right.
cup of coffee every morning.
Fair
We don't
trade.
we don't think twice about it.
Fair trade.
It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and also the cell phones. I mean, look at the chips. Look at where they're created. Chinese, you know, suicide net factories.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone has a slave in their pocket.
You know, so slavery is, you know, obviously there's violent enslavement and forcing people to do things against their will. But, you know, slavery is just such a state of mind. And, you know, people are really tuned in to being slaves and they just don't really realize it, or they celebrate it. You know, it's kind of an Orwell Huxley conversation. You know, are they not aware of it, or do they just not want to be at all?
Or they're just content with it and they don't care. Just give me my soma.
Well, I mentioned it before, and that's what bothers me probably the most about the city of Durham's Instagram is seeing the servile character of people in their comments. You know, like
this is like the daily like nausea treatment.
Yeah, like
it's incredible.
You know, people thanking them for their new draconian mask wearing, you know, posts about their new policies. Like they'll post a picture of the mayor, Steve Schul, you know, signing a piece of paper to do with the latest lockdown. And people are like, thanks, Durham, you're doing it right. You're not like those other cities who are allowing people to go back to work. And I'm just like, you love being a slave.
Yeah,
you just love it.
Yeah.
Recently, it might have been on Mayor Schul. He posted something about him signing a resolution by former President Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, who cares? You know, like you're signing a resolution from a non-active member.
You know,
of
that's
a
what they
legislative
do a lot of
process.
times.
So what?
In these meetings, if you ever have the unfortune of going to a city council meeting, it's 80% backpatting.
Oh, yeah.
Self backpatting.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
And you know, there's a lot of backpatting going on in City Hall and Durham and in Raleigh because they mandated the mask wearing before the governor.
Yes.
So
we're ahead of the curve. We're science based. We got Duke Hospital, the crown jewel of healthcare. It's
That's
like,
right.
shut the fuck up.
That's right. That's right. And we're managing the narrative. You know, we're right alongside New York.
Right.
You know.
Oh yeah, we were on television. You know, Chief Davis. Oh, this bitch. She was on USA Today, not COVID related, but it was in lieu of police reform. And you know, we should really do an expose on this woman sometime.
Mm-hmm. She's from Atlanta, right?
Well, she was previously retired, and she came out of retirement to come work this job as chief of police. And she's got quite an extensive resume. She is president of this fraternity. Just pull up her Wikipedia. You know, just check it out. And she is president of this law enforcement fraternity comprised of black police officers. You know, she's done some training previously with the Israeli police.
Mm-hmm.
She's done a lot of international jobs. I mean, it's really worth a look. Is this what I think?
So if you're on Zetetic.news, you got to check out the city of Durham spending thousands of dollars putting together this. And this was right after she joined the force from Atlanta, right? Got to get on the Running Man Challenge.
If they want a challenge, we'll give them a challenge.
Have you seen this, Xavier?
No.
Oh, you haven't seen this? This is going to be good.
You need to get it together before game time. Go. I knew we should have put him in the first place.
Oh, they even worked with local news.
Imagine that. Do they have some kind of standing relationship?
Atlanta dropped the mic on Durham?
Can you believe that?
They did, and we've been trying. We just cannot get it.
Show us what you can do.
Well, it's just not. It's not really clicking. It's like.
Something like
It's.
something.
Oh my goodness.
Something. I can't get. I just can't get it. I've been trying.
Okay.
Well, you got to have heart when you do this dance. You got to have confidence. Let them show you. Okay? Oh my gosh.
I am constantly thinking of you.
The resources.
Wow.
This is
a serious PR effort here.
Yeah.
So this was a national challenge that took place, I think, 4 years ago. It's hard for me to place it on the map, but neighboring municipalities would challenge one another, and they would
see who could spend the most public money on their stupid video.
And my favorite part of this particular one is when they get the fucking bomb robot in on it and they're dancing. But Wake County, a neighboring county where our capital resides, in their challenge video, they're making it rain with tickets.
Yeah, they were literally, Xavier, they're in the office with tickets, and they're
shameless.
But how the mighty have fallen,
Yeah.
But, of course, people were critical of this ridiculous challenge when it surfaced.
Right.
But, I don't think this would really fly if it happened
it's
right now.
just so interesting how quickly the psyche of the population can turn. It seems like, anyways, you're
spot on.
We were thanking our law enforcement for making sure that everybody's locked down, and now because of MSNBC's presentation of George Floyd getting killed and the way they framed that, well, of course, BLM and all that's been building for a while, and it was just like they just lit the fuse.
Right. It's just the goldfish memory that's just instigated by the news cycle and the election cycle.
Also, did people forget about Jussie Smollett?
Yes, they did forget.
People just completely forgot that like a year ago, a huge racial hoax was perpetrated against the psyche of the nation. And he was outed.
Right.
And then nothing happened to him.
Right.
And the entire court case was sealed. Okay?
Did you?
So now we have
the news thing, right?
Yeah, I was going to say we have Bubba. Yeah.
This is the new Jussie Smollett situation, right?
It didn't really stick to the wall like Juicy Smollett.
Right.
Juicy.
But,
So
it was kind of used as a point of reference for other sports organizations, these tax exempt nonprofits, for them to operate and conduct themselves because of NASCAR's prompt response, to the allegation that there was a noose hanging in the stall of Bubba. But the FBI, of course, concluded that it had been hanging in this particular garage stall since November of 2019.
And the guy never even saw it, right?
Well, it's not only that, a noose is a knot that you can tie with a rope, and it has practical uses other than just historically hanging people. And, sure, there's other knots you could have tied.
It's a type of slip knot.
Slip knot.
It is, exactly. You could have tied a slip knot, but this.
Wait, is this Bubba right here? They call him Black?
Yeah.
Man, it's interesting who gets to be black and white. I hate just the monolithic, like the oversimplification of race, period.
Oh,
you know, like when we
yeah.
say white people,
Ugh,
there's so many disparate groups of
You're
whites.
talking about 30 different languages, 30 different cultures, 30 different unique genetic lines. I
Well,
mean,
it's-
it's a gross oversimplification. It's like
just like it is
kindergarten.
to say black.
It's
Yeah,
not
sure.
that you say it; you have to say it when you fill out your paperwork.
So
you
this-
know, when I was buying some firearms recently, and on the firearm application, you know, the FFL,
Right.
You know, like, and there's two separate questions. You know, I'm in North Carolina, but you know, this is a federal sheet of paper that you're looking at. It's, are you Hispanic or non-Hispanic, right? And then after that, it's, you know, white, black, etc. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. What does this have to do with anything right now?
Right.
You know, they make you say it. They make you repeat it.
I said this to Orthogonal. I wanted to make sure I brought it up because the progression of this year going from lockdown to now we're in a new civil rights movement, I guess. Okay. Draws itself to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if you're watching, I've got it up on screen, the Wikipedia. I find it comically ironic that all this civil rights stuff is happening post Cerveza lockdown, and it was actually the Civil Rights Act which is lauded as a great step forward, which led to the shutdowns in the first place. Because with the act, ostensibly to right the wrongs of the past, the federal government was given broad new authority to govern how businesses conducted themselves. And basically it took away private property rights, which are like, they're non-existent now. So we were talking earlier about the pool, and Orthogonal made the point, you know, well, it's their private property. They don't necessarily have to comply, but in a sense it's not their private property because it's a place of business.
Right.
The government is getting some sort of jurisdiction to govern how you conduct that. And this,
who you conduct it with.
Exactly. And this extends itself to employment. You know, to your point about forms asking you for your race. If we live in an equitable society, why is that information even being collected? If not to decide who to discriminate against and who not.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be less discriminatory to have a sheet that says nothing about race at all?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just say all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. You know,
Right.
That's pretty much what these forms are telling us.
Yep. That's definitely a good point there. Civil Rights Act, you know, under the color of creating a law that respects people in a more, you know, institutionalized manner, they create new color of law for themselves to interpret their role in intruding in those very same people's lives on the basis of whatever justification they want, including
Correct.
equality and inequity, and
it was Dr. Paul who said that, you know, the moral criteria of what's used to determine, you know, what racist behavior or racist acts actually are will ultimately be determined by the moral composition of the legislators. And it's like, well, that sounds like a real problem, guys.
Right.
Big problem.
You know, huge problem. So, you know, we could have certainly had a Civil Rights Act of 1964 that took place, but authored differently, you know, because it really just did extend the powers of the federal government to business and commerce of the interstate.
But it's supposed to make things more fair, you know, but they always have an unintended opposite consequence. I mean, and it's not just against white people either, or black people. It's like, even at Harvard, they're trying to conform to this idea of diversity, right? That's what they're trying to inculcate, regardless of diversity's actual merits. So at Harvard and Yale and stuff, a lot of times they've got a disproportionate number of Asians who, you know, are qualified to attend said institutions based on their criteria, but they will actually decline those in lieu of less proficient individuals, be they white, black, or whatever, simply to have a racial quota of diversity, so to speak. But it's like, if you have an exceptional organization with exceptional people, with exceptional traits that are above all the, who cares what their skin looks like? We can observe that and be like, wow, this particular skin of, they, for whatever reason, we can have that conversation, but there's nothing inherently bad about that. You know what I mean? Like, if you had an orchestra and you wanted to, have the best musicians for the instruments that you wanted to assemble in that orchestra, and they all happen to be black or all happen to be Hispanic, who cares? You still want to listen to the music.
Right.
So why would we lower the standard just to have, a certain number of white guys or black guys on campus? It, to me...
Also, we can have a W-2.
Right.
All these steps forward so we can take some backwards, and you can just steal my private property.
We all have to submit we all have to sort of collectively agree that, the government is going to make things right. They're gonna look out for the diversity, and that's gonna make things good, because that's definitely worked, right?
I mean, and then right after this was, of course, the immigration reform of '65, which then stripped from the original language in the early 1800s about Europeans of good character. Who were the primary candidates for people who were to be let in with open arms in terms of immigration into the United States. And that was completely stricken, and then it became this big racial quota thing of like, well, we have to let a certain amount of applicants, percentage-wise, who are applying from this country to be let in. And then, then the whole south of the border thing became just sort of a sort of joke. There's never been really a boundary or a border there, and you can trace a lot of that back to Covidiocracy, in his aspiration for a worldwide mass mixed race population. That would be homogenous and subject to corporate control in an easier way than nationalized.
What color do you think that would be? Probably be gray, right?
Yeah, sort of a grayish tan. And he even labeled it and said that it was the Eurasian Negroid. This is Nicholas Covidiocracy's. Yeah, he said by the year 2100 that the populations would have completely intermixed to the point that everyone would start to resemble everyone else a little bit.
That's an interesting thought. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Because we've been around for so long, yet you still have so many opposite sides of the spectrum.
That's true. I think it's dovetailed in with the depopulationist stuff of huddling people into cities and not having these really diverse nation groups and cultures and anything like that. It's actually, interesting enough, it's anti-diversity through these racial categories, because they're collapsing real diversity and presenting a counterfeit sort of infantilized version of diversity through these blanket racial categories. And that's a serious deception. It's a serious.
I think the most tangible and identifiable point of what you're talking about is this concept of cultural appropriation.
That's the worst.
Because realistically, what is happening is that, and I don't mean to make it sound like there aren't people that have just cheaply ripped off things from people's culture and are attempting to sell them
or make it derogatory.
They're just,
but they're allowed to do that.
They're grifters, but then what ends up happening is that you are no longer just sharing your culture with other cultures.
Yeah,
and it's just that,
But also, who's the arbiter of what is from a given culture or not? I mean, really, like, I've seen people go as far as to say cornrows are like a black
right
invention. Everybody's got hair. I'm sure that, you know, how would you possibly know that? Not even a paleontologist, archaeologist would be able to fucking say, which race did cornrows first. I mean,
So
who
it's-
fucking cares at a certain point?
Exactly. And that always, you know, I've probably talked about it on this show already, but that just to illustrate our level of density as a civilization right now, where we are, you know, on the show Star Trek.
Yeah, we're getting denser, right?
You know,
we ain't going anywhere.
So on Star Trek, when Patrick Stewart was initially cast as Jean-Luc Picard, you know, they in the screen test in the pilot, they had him fitted with a toupee, like a wig, and eventually production decided against it. You know, they're like, we're not going to do this, and they had an argument, and the point was made that, you know, in the future nobody would be bald. You know, they would have cured baldness already, right? And it's like, well, that's a good point. You know, like that makes sense. You know, if science is going in this direction, but someone made the excellent point that in the future they wouldn't care.
Right.
Like they would not care if you're bald. You know, this is a civilization that, you know, if you subscribe to heliocentrism, has, you know, they are on a voyage in the final frontier.
Yeah, aliens wouldn't know any different.
You know, think about the obstacles that were overcame to successfully travel interstellar space. You know, and it didn't happen worrying about your hair color,
right,
or whether you were bald,
such
or ugly,
three-dimensional
you know?
sort of
and
ideas.
That's something that the show just takes full. I mean, it indulges in critiquing, you know, the trivial pursuits of our present day society.
Well, it's I think we're at a point in our human development where we are supposed to be ascending to a higher frequency. And this obsession with skin color, and what you look like, what you're wearing, like a mask and all that, it is almost to bring us down into a denser state of materiality.
Sure.
Wouldn't you agree?
Sure. It's coloristic reductionism.
Yeah.
And, you know, light is such a powerful reality. And if we just get caught up in color coding each other all the time, like, are we ever going to see the true, like, lightness or potential of our fellow man? Like, probably not.
Right.
So it's really an endarkenment, you know, no pun intended, of rational cognizance around common interests.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Orthogonal, you sent me this clip, Lord Jamar. I'm not sure who this guy is. You want to give some background?
I have no idea who he is either. You know, it's just something
probably in the hip hop community.
Google forwarded to me, you know, in my news feed.
Okay.
And,
I don't know who this gentleman is, but it was pretty funny.
He is he has kind of pro-Muslim, kind of like black Muslim.
Like Nation of Islam?
Yeah, like that kind of messaging is in some of his.
Is he like a rapper or?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like a consciousness rapper.
Gotcha.
I figured.
Yeah.
That's because I'm racist.
And I'm not no Black Lives Matter supporter. Like,
You're not?
No, absolutely.
Why not?
Because it's not our movement. This is a movement that was given to us by, you know, George Soros and his fucking boys. Because they saw how things were going and they didn't want it to go back to the 60s to where we start having our own organic movements. That was a big fucking problem for them. So let's give the people a movement that we can control. We'll provide them the leaders and all of this type of shit. And yeah, Black Lives Matter. The leaders of Black Lives Matter.
Are there leaders? Black Lives Matter?
Yeah.
Who?
Look at these lesbian women. We're trying to incorporate, you know, LG, whatever the fuck the letters are, incorporate their concerns into black people's concerns. Go to the website, look it up. And
he's on point.
Sure.
On point. I've had some colleagues mention to me that Black Lives Matter. He was like astonished. He's like, I went to their website. I'm open-minded, you know. I go there and it's like transgender, LGBTQ, end of the family. He's like, I hate slavery. This is like a really well-meaning white guy. He's like, I'm so objectionable. I support the North, you know, like he's actually into the Civil War and stuff. And he's like, I think it's great what we did, you know? And he's like, but, if Black Lives do matter, I agree with that. But then I go to the site and it's this.
Yep.
And I'm just like, yeah, dude.
It's the entire SJW cafeteria rolled into
a buffet bar.
Yeah, it is a giant radicalist buffet bar. It rolled into a completely unobjectionable statement that has no context or qualification. It's like, it's very. I mean, going back to the Jesuits, it's very Jesuitical.
Mm.
And I think that, you know, if you look at Marx's education, I think he received some Jesuit education at Vienna. You know, and the original communism was really not Marxism. It goes back to the Catholic Church with Thomas Aquinas.
Well,
it's theocratic communism.
What do you mean? The Catholic Church was communistic?
Oh yeah.
Huh.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You sent this article, the Catholic Case for Communism.
Yeah.
Can I call him the Black Pope? Is that allowed?
Right. Oh yeah. Arturo Sosa.
I'll call him the nigger Pope. Okay.
Arturo Sosa. Check him out. He's above his Jesuit counterpart subsidiary, Pope Francis, who doesn't even live in the papal quarters. He lives in another penthouse. Superior General of the Society of Jesus. Okay? And Pope Francis is just a Jesuit. So this guy is the real Pope. And Francis is just a PR, you know, spokesperson.
Yeah. Is this the same as the Black Pope?
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember Adolfo.
Uh-huh.
That guy.
Adolfo Nicholas.
So
yep.
Ben Fulford believes that he was involved. He actually says that he has a recorded phone conversation where this guy claimed responsibility for the March 11th, 2011 Japanese tsunami, which was not a natural tsunami according to Ben, but rather a deep sea explosion that pushed the bedrock up and caused it artificially. And that claim was, you know, supported by the seismic measurements, which indicated there were no shock waves or aftershocks. There were no aftershocks, and there was no, I don't know what the technical term is, but earthquakes start slowly and build into the peak, and the peak is what they report as peak magnitude, but it's rumbling. It's not sudden. This was sudden, and that showed up in the seismographs, I think is the term for it. But anyways, he said this guy, you know, and that tsunami ostensibly was to blackmail the Japanese government into continuing to support the U.S. corporation and their oligarch rulers, including the Rockefellers, and you know, they have been essentially, Japan has been somewhat of a colony, an industrial colony, ever since we subjugated them in the war. We've got these military agreements and whatnot. So I don't know. These guys are super evil, though.
Oh,
I mean,
and they're arguably they are the most expansive intelligence network.
Absolutely,
worldwide. I mean,
the Catholic Church.
Well, yes, and specifically the Jesuit coadjutors.
They're the largest landowners in the world, the Catholic Church.
Well. Yeah.
And Ben Fulford talks a lot about basically every senator in the United States is offered silver or lead. And the silver is just a metaphor for a Vatican bank account. So I don't know if everyone's offered this, but the Vatican Bank definitely is involved with black budget misdealings and bribery and everything you can imagine.
It's interesting they call it black budget, and,
Right.
and Black Lives Matter gets a lot of quote unquote dark money.
Totally.
I mean, it's so interesting. All these different terms, right? Continue to circulate around in the political arena today more than in even previous decades, and it's interesting that it's almost like a revelation of the method.
Well, actually, that brings me to one of the memes that we posted on the ZNN Instagram, because it just occurred to me that the mask is one letter off.
The 19th letter of the alphabet.
And what significance is that? I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so COVID-19.
Wow, interesting. I didn't even think of that, but it's one letter off. R and S are right next to each other in the alphabet.
The 18th letter, which is 666. It's very interesting how sophisticated this sort of syzygies of numbers and letters are becoming in the headlines and in the major news stories. And I mean, and even in Revelation itself, I mean, what is the mark of the beast? Is that really like a cryptic numerological code for like these elite occult societies to implement? They get to play with the sort of terminology and the translations and codify it into whatever technology or program they want. It's basically like a sigil of power.
To a large extent, I feel like the mark of the beast has already been implemented. It's
Right.
just evolving into the new version.
Absolutely. We've had fiat money and concept of central banks since the days of Babylonia, but now we're in the era of ending your biological autonomy, where you don't get to decide what goes into your body,
And you're
or what doesn't
responsible.
go.
You're responsible for everybody else's immunity. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
You're
going to be very
sick until
interesting.
proven healthy.
Sick
until proven healthy.
With this mRNA vaccine that's going to be hitting the streets before the end of the year, right? They're supposed to be one out. This isn't, we've talked about this before, this isn't a typical immunization. This isn't your seasonal flu shot.
Nope.
As if that's something you should even get. This is a unproven experimental vaccine that sends RNA instructions that are going to alter your DNA. And it's just, it's a one-size-fits-all medical solution that, I mean, we'll be discovering the consequences of this for decades to come.
It is hardcore tyranny.
If you look at the third world countries have been the playgrounds for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's something else we talked about, but they sterilized all those people in Africa under the guise of that tetanus campaign for neonatal tetanus. And what happened was the recipients of the vaccines, their bodies developed antigens. So not only were they not able to become pregnant after this, they stillborn their babies, like immediately. It's disgusting. So that's what stands to happen here is, and who knows? It could depend on what your sequence is, what the outcome is.
Well, they don't know, and Bill Gates admits that certain percentage of people are going to have an adverse health effect from any vaccine.
How could they be adverse if you're sending the instructions? It's literally doing what it's told you to do.
Well, if the intention is to do something that's going to destroy your fertility, then that's how,
Right. It's not like when I take too much cold medicine or something, like I have an adverse effect.
Well, because everybody's genome is different. So they can't uniformly put RNA into a vaccine and expect everybody to take those instructions and deal with them in their own, in the same way. Plus, it's not just about the RNA. It's also the preservatives and the substrate of the vaccine.
Sure, yeah, that's something that Moderna hasn't really disclosed in these clinical trials. The delivery agent, what's actually
just on its face, the fact that they haven't done any like long-term testing with peer-reviewed methodologies and a high volume of test
it doesn't
patients.
even matter if it is being done. Recently,
Of course not.
The Lancet and I believe the New England Medical Journal, after this whole after these first rounds of trials, it came out that the hydrochloroquine study, the WHO was going to resume those trials, and it became known that the 92,000 subjects, that the data that was being utilized to determine that, we shouldn't use this drug, in an audit, it could not be verified. 92,000 subjects. And, behind a closed door meeting, the CEO of the Lancet says that we cannot publish clinical trials, if this is the case, because of how powerful the pharmaceutical companies have become, that they can make any study look like anything.
Right.
And we won't know about it until after the fact.
Right. Yeah, actually, if you listen to the fluoride lawsuit, you get a window into the sort of deceptive tactics used by not only the government hiring attorneys who have defended big industry in light of various, lawsuits that have taken place due to their malfeasance. And it's just disturbing that the EPA would leverage, industry sympathizers to justify, a public health practice that, has obvious, problems with respect to people's not only consent but health. And that's just par for the course. I mean, it's like Monsanto Bayer paying $10 billion or whatever for their long-term use of and promotion of Roundup, and it's like $10 billion. That's it. Like
that's nothing.
That's cost of doing business.
Right. Well,
right there.
It was a settlement. Like they did.
Right,
it wasn't
right.
proven in court that it caused the damages, so they're still on the shelf. You can
exactly.
We can still go
you
buy
can still
this
go
shit.
buy it. Right. It's a settlement.
It's disgusting.
Well, we kind of have to wrap up here in the next few minutes. This actually broke
today,
like right before at 12:47 Eastern, which there's few reports earlier than that, I'm sure. But Ghislaine Maxwell accused of critical role in Epstein abuse as prosecutors unveil charges. So this is something obviously we've been tracking since ZNN's inception almost.
Yep.
And
how interesting that this is like kind of a sort of third scene within this big theater that's been rolled out in 2020.
Absolutely.
Part 2. And as we've detailed, there are just too many inconsistencies and absurdities in the suicide narrative of Epstein to hold any water whatsoever. Like the holes are just crazy. And, there's even some evidence to suggest that circumstantial evidence that it may not be the actual guy who was rolled out of that.
I don't think he's dead.
I personally don't think he's dead either.
He's in an indeterminate state, which she is soon to be in.
She is probably soon to be
right.
in.
Yeah, I'm not even convinced she was arrested.
I'm not even totally convinced either.
We'll see
it's
what
the
happens.
FBI.
It could be in another one of these just drop dead doppelgangers. I mean, the occult thespian networks have these lookalikes.
And they have the means.
Will they extradite Prince Andrew? Because she's gonna. You talk about a sweetheart plea deal for Jeffrey Epstein. What do they got lined up for her? Who is she gonna give up?
Right.
Or who is she gonna tell them that they'll give up?
It's. I don't think the UK is gonna give up Prince Andrew to Donald Trump. You know.
You think that by that you mean he'll be disposed of, or he just won't ever step in the court?
But he's already said he wouldn't, and he wouldn't answer any questions, and,
Right.
and nothing's happened.
Nothing's happened to him.
You know, it's just a bunch of paper tiger shit. It's like
I'm aware of that, but he hasn't been extradited yet.
he hasn't been extradited, but I think the attorneys who filed that they were very careful in their initial statement. They said, you know, our intention is not to extradite him. It's just to get him to answer some questions.
Which is absurd because he also knew Seville, and I mean Epstein's just one node in this worldwide.
I know.
You know, it's not like, okay, well, this is the last news y'all are gonna have about worldwide child sex trafficking.
Maxwell's father was a pretty interesting character.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Robert Maxwell, Promise Software, Macmillan Publishing.
The fucking school books?
Yeah, bro.
That's Ghislaine's father?
Yeah.
What?
Macmillan is a subsidiary of Robert Maxwell's publishing group.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Member of Parliament, suspected spy, and fraudster. Unbelievable. Maxwell rose from poverty to build an extensive publishing empire. His death, huge discrepancies in his company's finances were revealed, including his fraudulent misappropriation of the Mirror Group pension fund, meaning he took it.
He was actually meeting with the Bank of England the next day or day of when he died. He fell off of his yacht and drowned or some bullshit like that.
Supposedly. Right.
Wow. Macmillan Inc. is a now mostly defunct American publishing company, once the American division of the British Macmillan Publishers. Remnants of the original American Macmillan are present in McGraw-Hill's Education. You know, these are the books that have pictures of...
I saw it coming too.
These are the books. Where is it? Carrying multi-ton granite rocks that were chiseled with wood hammers and crude chisels.
Yeah.
You know.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Macmillan educators. You fucking assholes.
Sure.
Yeah. If you all think the pyramid of Giza is impressive, wait till you hear about the ramp that they had to build to make the pyramid.
Right. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, I'm getting off on a tangent now, but
it's a crazy, amazing tangent though, because it's just more and more of these architectural evidences. If you look at like the explanation of them, it's just absurd.
It is very telling though, because you know we open these textbooks and you know in retrospect we can look back and laugh, and we're thinking to ourselves, you know, who would put this shit in this book? And
right.
It's like, oh, well, now we know it's this guy.
Unbelievable.
You know, it's this. These are the people behind your textbooks.
Incredible.
Boom.
Well, I think that's gonna wrap it for today. It's been an awesome episode 10 with you guys. Head over to Zetetic.news. If you're just listening on one of the podcast platforms, we are still on YouTube. Hopefully soon we'll be streaming live 24/7 restreams on the Theta network. Not much has happened in that regard, but there is a hackathon that will be concluding, I think, in August, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of integrations there might be so we can move off of YouTube altogether and have our own, independence. I will be paying you guys another 500 T-Fuel for your attendance here in studio today.
Sweet.
So look forward to that. And that's it.
Awesome.
Any parting words, Xavier, or orthogonal, before we wrap this one up?
I guess just, after every episode, we're always like, oh, can't wait till the next one. We have so much more stuff to talk about. And that's going to be like a reoccurring theme this entire year, because the pitch at which all these incredible events are transpiring and the discussions that really need to be taking place but aren't is at all-time highs right now, and it shows a lot of good prospective trajectory for ZNN. I think the more people listen to us and kind of connect the dots that we've been connecting, I think that there'll be some great...
I'll tell you, this is an awesome outlet. Just being able to have the... I like hanging out with you guys and having these conversations, but it's so much more fun to be able to share it. And so I'm really happy we were able to get somewhat operational this year. I didn't see in a crystal ball that this was going to be such a fucking crazy year, but it is such a fucking crazy year, and it's great to be able to share our thoughts in real time with the rest of the people with ears to hear, I guess.
Totally. The material is to infinity and beyond, really.
Orthogonal phasing out?
Phasing out, yeah. I think the next time we all get together, I suspect we will be discussing a cataclysmic 4th of July.
Yeah, any predictions for July 4th before we jump off here?
I have long since, I maintain that I'm predicting a violent false flag shootout, and they've been stoking the both sides of the spectrum, the reactionary right and the idiotic left. And, we've gone from having business owners being grandma killers that just want to open their private business to, nurses out on the streets applauding the protesters marching, thousands deep. Just the whole hypocrisy of it, this is really coming to a swell. And as this movement, as they begin and move to destroy these monuments in this country, because they're not going to stop at the Confederate monuments, I really see a idiotic call to arms from the reactionary right, from these boogaloo morons that are going to come out here to protect the Constitution.
And they're not going to do the movement any good.
They're not. There's going to be genuine patriots that come out there to heed the call, but it's going to be a bunch of idiots that really just have fantasies about killing people.
Right.
If not that, it's going to be co-opted by agent provocateurs, if not literal CIA. And just one person is going to have to let that gun off, and the bullets will start flying. And then it will it will become again what it has been, this gun confiscation discussion. And that's what I really see this becoming next, because Xavier, you say that the points are being connected, and they are, but the probabilities are really collapsing, and just the likelihoods of things that are going to happen or occur have never had a greater chance to manifest. And that's what I really think that we're going to go see.
We're going to enter a new state of Covidiocracy.
Right.
Correct. And something I hope that we can talk about on the next episode is the Z-Bellion. Z-Bellion, the Pentagon's prepped white paper for dealing with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, we should have a crypto episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is all of that. I mean, everything is coming to a head just like we predicted in our episode of the top 20 mega singularities. It's crazy how it's almost like we summoned an actual forecast or something. It is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it's just going to become more prescient as the year goes on.
And I just, wow. I think it's entirely likely, you're right, that the probability of these things not happening are starting to go the way of Murphy's Law. And if something bad is going to happen, it probably will. Along these lines, and especially since the stage has been set, all the vitriol and the rhetoric is being put up on pedestals and mainlined. It's unreal. I don't know if there'll be a specific event over this upcoming weekend, but I do anticipate within the next couple weeks there being some big flare up or major conflagration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll make Las Vegas look like a walk in the park.
Right.
you
Definitely.
know? And
definitely.
not to say that old fat guy was the was the one who did that, but
That was swept under the rug, wasn't it?
oh, absolutely.
Oh, that was big time swept under the rug.
Yeah, I was reading about, not to drag us out yet, but I was reading about something.
We can talk about everything.
Last night about the ammunition that he was using was all illegally manufactured. That it wasn't just over the shelf, stuff that I get at Walmart or Cabela's.
Yeah.
Right.
And not to mention, no one really talks about all the child porn.
Oh,
that was, as far as
nobody talks about it at all anymore.
As far as I'm concerned, this guy was fucking dead in that room when this all was going on.
Right.
That, the special forces, you know a lot more about that hotel than I do, the Mandalay Bay. That dude was already dead when those special forces started.
I mean, if he was even real.
Yeah, if there wasn't multiple shooters.
They could put a damn picture of anybody up on TV and people will just...
Yeah, dude, the Zebellion, and we need to get into Scanner Darkly.
Oh, yeah.
That's just resumed because we are going to start seeing the deep fakes, like the...
Big time.
The high production value faked audio and video clippings that we're going to see and hear with our own eyes.
Yeah.
And I might hear and see you guys saying some crazy shit over here, and you could be standing right next to me when it happens.
I'll have to end it on this note, but Ben Fulford has talked about Donald Trump being blackmailed. Now, whether he's a legit pedo or not, that's a legit subject of discussion, given his association.
Verdict's still out.
But Roy Cohn and all that,
we are entering a time now where even if, let's just say he wasn't, he could be blackmailed with a deep fake video of him raping somebody, and he would see that and know if the public sees this, they're going to believe it because they're not sophisticated enough to... It's not going to matter whether it's real or not.
I've watched
plenty
of fake celebrity sex tapes in my life.
Sure.
That like 10, 15 years ago were faked.
Right.
Right.
So that's completely on the table.
Yep.
And you're right. It won't even matter.
It won't matter.
The damage will
and
have
he'll
been
know.
done.
Well, I'm not... This could be anybody, but I'm saying in Trump's case... Let's just presume his innocence for a moment. He sees that. He's a media guy. He'll know that it won't matter. The public is just not. And then even if it comes out that it was fake, you're going to have people who want to believe it. So they'll believe it anyways.
Yeah,
of course.
That sounds familiar. It is something that people wanted to believe. Russiagate. Or,
Russiagate,
weapons of mass destruction.
Climate change, science.
Anyway.
I believe in science. All right. It's been real, y'all. Talk to you soon.
Phasing out.
Phasing out.
Phasing out.